All right, hello, good afternoon, and welcome back to the Law Entrance YouTube channel. My name is Govind Singh, and today we are covering a very special topic, which is mastering the Indian Constitution, understanding the Indian Constitution. So, this is a topic which is relevant not just from a legal point of view, but also from a GK point of view, because we have seen that many a times questions have been asked, be it current GK, be it static GK, which are based around the Indian Constitution. It could be based on sources of the Constitution, it could be based on the historical development of the Constitution, it could be based on amendments to the Constitution, or very simply, it could be based on articles of the Indian Constitution. Now, that being said, what are the things which we need to know about this particular topic, about understanding the Indian Constitution? So, we'll look at the historical development of the Constitution, we'll look at the salient features of the Constitution, we'll look at the sources of the Constitution. We might break up this class into two parts if we are not able to cover all of it in today's session. But let's see how much we can study today. So, without any further ado, let's begin talking about what exactly is the Indian Constitution. Now, what is your understanding when we say the word Constitution? What do you guys understand? Most of you might say that it is a book which contains certain laws, which contains certain principles, which contains certain rules. Rules for what? Principles for what? Rules which govern a country, which govern a nation, to be very specific. Now, these are the rules which are very essential to how a country runs. For example, the constitution would be a little different for a country which is autocratic in nature, for a country which is theocratic in nature, for a country which is secular in nature, or for a country which is, let's say, communist in nature. So there would be different parameters, there would be different principles, there would be different rules according to how these different types of countries are governed. Ours is a secular country, we all know. So we'll look at how that shapes up. But that being said, it is established that the constitution is not something which is same for all countries. It is very exclusive, very personalized to every individual country based on the multiple factors, based on the demographics, based on the population, based on the variety of ethnicities present in the country, based on the culture of the country, based on the history of the country. All of these things impact the formation of a constitution of a particular country. And is the Indian constitution a fixed document? The answer to that is no. The Indian constitution is not a fixed document. It is, you could say, a dynamic document which adapts to the changing needs of time. Good afternoon, Satviki. Welcome to the class. We are talking about Indian Constitution today. So I was telling that Indian Constitution is dynamic in nature. And how do you understand it is dynamic in nature? Because there is scope for amendments. You can amend the Constitution, you can improve the Constitution through these amendments which are passed by the legislature. Now, let's turn the pages of history and let's look at how the Indian Constitution came into being, how it came into existence. So, let's proceed with that. Now, we all know that India got its independence on which day? It was August 15th, 1947. Two dominions were born. Which two dominions? India and Pakistan. We all know that. This is simple history, correct? Constituent Assembly members took the oath, power assumed by Indians, working for common prosperity. Now, what else was there? Nation woke up to a new life. Mr. Nehru became the first prime minister and called for big effort from the people, talking about incessant striving task for future. Incessant means unstoppable, something which carries on. Lord Mountbatten greeted Pakistan, the newly formed country, but the partition, the independence also came at a huge cost. What was the cost? The cost was heavy riot and deaths. Lot of people lost their lives due to the migration in which Muslims traveled from India to Pakistan. A lot of Hindus traveled from Pakistan to India. A lot of Sikhs traveled both of the ways, either India to Pakistan or Pakistan to India, because the country was divided more or less on communalistic lines. that the Pakistan would be a country which would be Muslim dominated, India would be a country which would be Hindu dominated, but more or less of a secular character, which would have place for other religions like Islam, like Sikhism, like Jainism, like Buddhism. So, Constituent Assembly took over charge of framing laws for the country, and Mountbatten became the Governor General. Now, Mountbatten was the first British Governor General of independent India. Does anyone of you know who was the first Indian independent Governor General? The first Indian Governor General of independent India. The name was C. Rajagopalachari. This is an important fact which is asked many a number of times. So you should know first Indian Governor General of Independent India, C. Rajagopalachari. Okay, now moving on, how did the Indian Constitution come into being? How did we get our Constitution? When did we get our Constitution? When was the idea conceptualized? When was the Constituent Assembly to form this Constitution made? Because it did not come into being on its own, right? We had a Constituent Assembly which framed our Constitution, which designed our Constitution. So let's talk about that. Let's talk about the making of the Indian Constitution. So the journey began in 1934 when the idea of a Constituent Assembly was put forward by the first time by Motilal Nehru. M.N. Roy and Motilal Nehru, a pioneer of communist movement in India. Then in 1935, what happened was the Indian National Congress for the first time demanded a constituent assembly from the Britishers to frame the constitution. So अगर आपसे पूछा जाए कि कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन के लिए कॉन्स्टिट्यूएंट असेंबली की डिमांड कांग्रेस ने कब करी, द ईयर वाज 1935. Then Nehru came into front and said that constitution must be framed, but without the interference of the Britishers by a constituent assembly, which is elected on the basis of adult franchise. That is, everyone above the age of 18 should vote for this constituent assembly, and that constituent assembly, without any external influence of the Britishers, should frame the constitution for India. Then came the August offer by the Britishers, where the demand for constitution was accepted, which was followed by the Cripps Mission. Many of you might have heard the name. It came in 1942. Sir Stafford Cripps, who was the member of the cabinet, gave India a draft proposal of the British government on the framing of an independent constitution to be adopted after World War II. But the Cripps mission was rejected by the Indian lawmakers because it did not give entire independence to India. It was talking about more like dominion status, India being a dominion of the Britishers, which was not acceptable to the readers at that time. And this also followed a very big freedom struggle movement by Gandhiji, which was called the Quit India movement, which also started in 1942, correct? Where the slogan of do or die was given. Then what happened in 1946 was that the Constituent Assembly to frame the constitution was finally constituted. That is, it was made. When it was made? In November 1946 under the scheme formulated by the Cabinet Mission Plan. Okay. Then Constituent Assembly was to be partly elected and partly nominated. That means some of the members were elected by people, some were nominated by the Britishers. Moreover, the members were to be indirectly elected by members of provisional assemblies who themselves were elected on a limited franchise. So that is called an indirect election. What happens for the president and the vice president in India, that people elect their MLAs and MPs, and then those people go on to elect your president and vice president. So basically, some of the members were elected indirectly as well. Now, talking a little bit more about the Constituent Assembly, it had members from all these communities: Hindus, Muslims, Sikhs, Parsis, Anglo-Indians, Christians, SCSTs, including women of all these sections. Now, let's look at the timeline. On 9th December 1946, the first meeting of the Assembly happened. Muslim League boycotted the meeting. Sachinanand Sinha made temporary president. Why is it written French practice? The French practice was the senior most member became the president of the first meeting. So following that practice, Sachinanand Sinha was the senior most member at that time in the Congress, and therefore he presided the first session. And uske baad the first elected president of the Constituent Assembly was Dr. Rajendra Prasad, who later went on to become the Indian president as well. This happened on 11th December 1946. So Rajendra Prasad was the first elected president of the Constituent Assembly, whereas the first formal president was Dr. Sachinanand Sinha. Then on 13th December, Jawaharlal Nehru moved the historic objective resolution in the assembly, which is the philosophy of the constitution's structure. And what was the main points of the objective resolution? We'll read about it here. And on 3rd June came the Mountbatten Plan, which talked about the independence of India on 15th of August 1947. Mountbatten was the Viceroy of India at that point of time. Now let's look at the objective resolution that India is an independent sovereign republic. Take note that the words secular, socialist were not in the objective resolution at that point of time. They were added through an amendment, which we'll look at later. India shall be a union of erstwhile British Indian territories, Indian states, and other parts outside British India and Indian states as are willing to be the part of the union. So you must have known from history that some of the states were independently ruled princely states, like the state of Jammu and Kashmir, like the state of Hyderabad, like the state of Patiala, like the state of Sikkim. So all of these were independently ruled and beyond the domain of British India, and they were later brought into the Indian territory by leaders like Jawaharlal Nehru. Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel played a huge role in uniting the country. That is why the monument which is built in Gujarat in his remembrance is called the Statue of Unity. So yeah, that is some history for you. Territories forming the union shall be autonomous units and exercise all powers and functions of government and administration except those assigned or vested in the union. What do we mean by autonomous? That means they can act on their own, they can act independently without external interference. All powers and authority of sovereign and independent India and its constitution shall flow from the people. So it was a constitution which was for the people and by the people. All people of India shall be guaranteed and secured social, economic, and political justice, equality of status and opportunities, and equality before law, and fundamental freedoms of speech, expression, belief, faith, worship, vocation, association, and action, subject to law and public morality. The minorities, backwards and tribal areas, depressed and other classes shall be provided adequate safeguards. Territorial integrity of the Republic and its sovereign right on land, sea, and air shall be maintained according to law of justice. Land would make full and willing contribution to promotion of world peace and welfare of mankind. So these were the basic principles of what the constitution should have looked like based on the objectives resolution given forward by Jawaharlal Nehru on 13th December 1946. Then what happened? The Indian Independence Act of 1947 came into play, and Assembly was made a fully sovereign body. That is, no foreign interference. It also became a legislative body, that means a lawmaking body, and became the first parliament of free India, a dominion legislature. Whenever the assembly met as a constituent body, it was chaired by Dr. Rajendra Prasad, and when it met as a legislative body, it was chaired by G.V. Mavlankar. Now, it is important to understand that how questions can be framed here. The question can ask you who was the chairman of the Constituent Assembly. Your answer would be Dr. Rajendra Prasad. But if they are asking you who was the chairman of the first Lok Sabha, who was the first speaker of the Lok Sabha, the answer to that is G.V. Mavlankar because it was acting as a legislative body, which means the Lok Sabha. So then the answer becomes G.V. Mavlankar. Otherwise, the answer is Rajendra Prasad. And these two functions continued till 26 November 1949, which is historically known as the day where we gave ourselves the Indian Constitution, and therefore it is called as the Constitution Day. We remember 26 November as Constitution Day or the Law Day. Correct? 26 November 1949, important date to remember. Constituent Assembly also performed all these functions as well. Ratified India's membership to the Commonwealth group of countries in May 1949, adopted the national flag on, this is important as a date, July 22, 1947. When was the national flag adopted? July 22. Adopted the national anthem on 24 January, national song also on 24 January 1950. Also very important dates. Adopting the flag, adopting the constitution, adopting the national anthem and song. These three dates are very important. And Dr. Rajendra Prasad became the first president of India on 24 January, the same date. So, first president of India, national song, national anthem, all three on 24 January 1950, flag on 22 July 1947, and constitution adopted on 26 November 1949. Okay. See, it's written here. The constitution was adopted on 26 November 1949, and this version of the constitution had a preamble, which we'll look at, 22 parts. 395 articles and 8 schedules. As of now, we have more articles, we have 12 schedules, but that came on later. The preamble was enacted after the entire constitution was already enacted. So preamble came later. What is the preamble? Preamble is the first page of the constitution, which has the basic principles of the constitution, the most important principles, the gist of the constitution, the summary of the constitution is mentioned in the preamble. Some provisions of constitution related to citizenship, election, provisional parliament, all of these came into force on November 26, 1949 itself. Now, you need to remember the heads of major important committees related to drafting of the Indian Constitution. So, the drafting committee was led by B.R. Ambedkar. The steering committee was led by Rajendra Prasad. The Union Powers Committee and Union Constitution Committee was led by Nehru. And Provincial Constitution Committee was led by Sardar Patel. So drafting by B.R. Ambedkar, steering by Rajendra Prasad, powers and constitution by J.N. Nehru, and provincial constitution by Sardar Patel. Important to remember, questions are asked out of this. Then, talking more about the drafting committee, which was set up on 29th August 1947, that is a few days after our independence, had 7 members. This is important. First was Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, who became the chairman of the drafting committee. Then there was N. Gopalaswamy Iyengar, then Alladi A.K. Iyer, then Dr. K.M. Munshi, Syed Muhammad Sadullah, N. Madhav Rao, who replaced B.L. Mitter, then T.T. Krishnamachari. He replaced D.P. Khaitan. Replacements are not important. Just need to remember these 7 names: B.R. Ambedkar, Gopalaswamy Iyengar, A.K. Iyer, K.M. Munshi, Syed Muhammad Sadullah, N. Madhav Rao, and T.T. Krishnamachari. Okay, so here is Dr. B.R. Ambedkar seated in the center. Let's move on. This is the signing of the Indian Constitution. India proclaimed sovereign democratic republic, which happened on January 1950, 26 January 1950, right, where we became a republic, which we celebrate as the Republic Day. Rajendra Prasad sworn in as president, proclamation read out by retiring Governor General, who was Mr. C. written, Mr. Chakravarti Rajagopalachari. Okay, now, these are some historical documents. This is the preamble. This is how it looked like. We, the people of United States. This is a snippet from the US preamble. This is the preamble. We, the people of US, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, and so on. So they had idea of defense, welfare, liberty, and all of these things. Domestic tranquility, justice, which was mentioned in the US Constitution. So we have borrowed a lot from constitutions of different countries, which reflects in our Constitution as well. When we look at our preamble, the first page of the Constitution, this is what it currently looks like. We, the people of India, having solemnly resolved to constitute India into a sovereign, socialist, secular, democratic republic, and to secure to all its citizens justice, liberty, equality, fraternity, in our Constituent Assembly this 26th day of November 1949, do hereby adopt, enact, and give to ourselves this Constitution. Right now, some of these words came later, such as integrity came later, and aapka socialist and secular came later. But this is what the preamble of the Constitution looks like. The American Constitution was the first to begin with a preamble. So we took the idea of preamble from the US Constitution. Important to remember. Preamble of Indian Constitution is based on objective resolution, which we just studied. Then, drafted and moved by Pandit Nehru, adopted by Constituent Assembly, reflects the mind of the Constitution makers and amended by 42nd Amendment, which added 3 new words: socialist, secular, and integrity. Okay, so integrity is here, socialist and secular are here. These were 3 words added by the 42nd Constitutional Amendment 1976. This question is asked so many times. Very important to remember. Please note this down. Okay. This is also called the mini Constitution Amendment, or like one of the most important amendments in the history of Indian Constitution. Okay. All right. Now we understood that preamble reflects the mind of the Constitution makers. This is the preamble in English and Hindi for you to refer to. Hindi वाला थोड़ा सा tough है समझने के लिए because the words are a little complicated for a person who does not know Hindi really well. संपूर्ण प्रभुत्व संपन्न समाजवादी पंथ निरपेक्ष लोकतंत्रात्मक गणराज्य is republic, लोकतंत्रात्मक is democratic, पक्ष निरपेक्ष is secular, समाजवादी is socialist, एंड प्रभुत्व समवन इज सॉवरेन. ठीक है, तो ये ट्रांसलेशंस होते हैं, तो ये आप पढ़ सकते हो हिंदी में भी. नाउ लेट्स understand these keywords mentioned in the constitution. What exactly do we mean by the word sovereign? Sovereign means that India is neither a dependency nor a dominion of any other nation. Dominion matlab operating under the control of any other nation, but an independent state free to conduct its own affairs, both internal affairs and external affairs. So that is what sovereign means, that no external interference in our matters. We would be completely independent and in charge of our internal and external matters. Then socialist. Congress party itself adopted resolution to establish a socialist pattern of society in its Awadi session. Indian brand of socialism is a democratic socialism and not a communistic socialism, also known as state socialism. So in democratic socialism, we hold the faith in a mixed economy where both public and private sectors can coexist side by side. Whereas in socialism, there is only the public sector. The government takes care of all these industrial activities and all of those things, and there is no private sector allowed. But India is a mixed economy which has democratic socialism with both public and private sectors coexisting side by side. So if someone asks you what is the meaning of the word socialist in the constitution, this is what it means: both public and private sectors can exist side by side. Indian socialism is a blend of Marxism and Gandhism, leaning heavily towards the Gandhian socialism. So we don't need to go into the depth of what is Marxist socialism and Gandhian socialism, but yeah, this is what you need to know. Okay, now talking about the word secular, which was added by 42nd Amendment, we just saw. This is a concept that all religions in the country have the same status and support from the state, which could also mean that there is no state endorsed religion like you have in Pakistan, which is Islam. So Pakistan has a state endorsed religion, that the religion of the state is Islam. It is a theocratic country rather than a secular country where people of other faiths can exist, but the state does not govern them any sort of rights or same status and support from the state, which is given in a secular country where all religions are respective, irrespective of their strength. So they might be in minority but have the same status and support from the state. State does not favor any particular religion. Democratic, we all know, doctrine of popular sovereignty, that person who has the support of the public, of people, would have the supreme power, possession of supreme power by the people. Republic means the head of the state is always elected directly or indirectly for a fixed period of time. Like US, India has an elected head called the president, elected indirectly for a period of 5 years. So that is what republic is, having the head of a state, elected directly or indirectly. A republic also means two more things: vesting of political sovereignty in the people and not in the king. So this is how it becomes different from what? A dictatorship. It becomes different from a monarchy. A republic is different from a monarchy and a dictatorship because the power is not with a king or a ruler, but the political sovereignty is in the people. Second, the absence of any privileged class, and hence all public offices being open to every citizen without any discrimination. So there is no bhav, there is no uch neech in public offices and holding of public offices. Everyone has the same rights as citizens. Now, these five pillars form the nature of Indian state. It is republic, which we just saw. It is democratic. It is sovereign. It is socialist and secular. This forms the nature of the Indian constitution. We understood the meaning of all these things. Socialist is welfare of people by both public and private sector. Secular is neutrality towards religion. Sovereign is independent state. Republic is head of the state is elected. Prime minister and president are elected. Then democracy is rule of people. Ours is a representative democracy. Okay. Now, then we look at some other words, which are justice, which means the ideal of justice, socio-economic and political, has been taken from Russian Revolution or the Russian Constitution. The idea of liberty, where is taken from the, I think, French Constitution. Liberty means absence of restraint on activities of individuals at the time, providing opportunities for development. It secures all citizens liberty of thought, expression, freedom, belief, and worship. Equality means absence of any special privileges to any section of society. Fraternity means having a sense of brotherhood, that is the dignity of an individual, and unity and integrity of the nation would be added by the word 42nd Amendment. So, justice is of three types: social justice, economic justice, political justice, liberty of thought, expression, belief, and worship, equality of status and opportunity, and fraternity of brotherhood and single citizenship. Okay, so these are some more principles of the preamble. Now, some historical cases which have led to evolution of the preamble is the Ray Beruberi case in 1960, where the court said that preamble is not a part of the constitution. So this was a debate that whether preamble is a part of the constitution or not. So in the first case, Beruberi Union case, it was said that no, preamble is not a part of the constitution. But then in Keshwanand Bharti case, the court held that preamble is a part of the constitution. Same in the LIC case, Supreme Court again said that preamble is an integral part of the constitution. So the status of preamble is like any other part of the constitution enacted by the Constituent Assembly, but after the rest of the constitution was already enacted. So it is independent as well. It's neither a source of power to legislature nor a prohibition upon the power of legislature. It is non-justiciable. That means you cannot argue on this, that you cannot really change the preamble based on circumstances. Provisions are not enforceable in the court of law. Okay? So you cannot enforce justice based on principles in the preamble like you can for the principles in the constitution. Okay. Now, amenability of the preamble, that is, can it be amended? Yes, it can be amended subject to the condition that no amendment is done to the basic features, that is, the fundamental features of the Constitution. So, these basic features were fixed by the Keshwanand Bharti case. The basic principle doctrine was given, the basic features doctrine was given, where it said that the fundamental features cannot be changed. Preamble cannot be altered by an amendment under Article 368. Preamble has been amended only once so far in 1976, which added three new words: socialist, secular, and integrity to the preamble. So this is what our preamble now looks like. Okay, and that brings us to the end of, I believe, the first session on understanding the Indian Constitution. I hope this was helpful. We did a lot of things. We looked at the amendment ability of the preamble. We looked at the cases involving preamble. We looked at principles of justice, liberty, equality, and fraternity and what they mean. We looked at what these five words mean: sovereign, socialist, secular, democratic, republic. We looked at their meaning and what do they stand for. Then we looked at what is the aim of the preamble. We looked at some details about how the preamble came into being. We looked at the US preamble. We looked at how transfer of power happened. We looked at the drafting committee and its members. We looked at the major committees involved in drafting the constitution. We looked at constitution in its initial phase looked like this when it was adopted. We looked at some developments which happened around that time: the adoption of the constitution, the adoption of the national flag, the adoption of national song and the national anthem, and the election of the first president of India. We also saw the first presidents of our assembly, the first formal president and the first elected president. And then we understood the objective resolution which formed the preamble of our constitution, brought in by Jawaharlal Nehru. And we discussed the evolution of how the idea of constitution came into being, starting from 1934 by M.N. Roy, moving on till Dr. Rajendra Prasad and B.R. Ambedkar in 1946, 47, 48, looking at the historical development of the same. So that is all about today's session about understanding the Indian Constitution. I hope this was a productive one. We'll carry on our discussion where we understand the subsequent features of the Indian Constitution, particularly the fundamental rights, probably in the next session which we have on understanding Indian Constitution. So you could say this was part one on understanding Indian Constitution, where we did the history of the Constitution, the making of the Constitution, the evolution of the Constitution. The next part, in the next part, we'll dive deeper into what exactly is present in the Constitution. What are the features? What are the articles enshrined in the Indian Constitution? And we'll probably discuss a little bit about fundamental rights. Thank you so much. I hope this class was productive. And we'll meet again in another class, probably on Monday in the Hindu analysis session. Satvik is saying, is Nehru Pact important? From a historical POV, yes, it is. Yes, Arshnur, it is still called as Law Day as well. Constitution Day and Law Day, you can call it either of them. Chalo, theek hai. Thank you so much, people, for attending. We are ending the class here. Bye bye. Take care. Signing off.